Hey, how's it going everyone? This is YLAM here, and today I'm going to be doing a quick review of the Fujifilm's 10-24 f4 OIS lens. So what that means is that this is a 10 to 24 millimeters in APS-C, so a crop sensor. The equivalent in 35 millimeter terms or full frame terms is a 15 to 36 millimeters. Now I'm going to break this review down into two halves. One of them is going to be reviewing it as a photo taking lens, and the other one is going to be used as a video lens. As many of you know, if you follow the Fujifilm system, they like to make all metal bodies for their lenses, and this is no exception. It is well crafted, it is very tough, the coating is also excellent. Haven't had any issues with it. This particular one has a rubber ring for its zooming system, which I initially thought they were going to put the rubber ones with a weather seal, but this is not a weather sealed lens. So I'm not exactly sure when Fujifilm decides to put a rubber zoom ring around their lenses as opposed to their metal ones. Like this is the kit lens and it has a metal zoom ring. Now if we look inside the lens, when we zoom, one of the things that I particularly like about this lens is that the barrel does not extend outward. So if I show you the top, it actually retracts inward a little bit and then it comes back out when I'm zooming back and forth. This is one of the things that I really like about lenses. I don't really particularly like carrying around lenses in which when I zoom it exposes the inner shell. This is polymer right here. It just makes for a much more fragile and it feels a little bit cheaper. So I really like the design in which the barrel actually does not extend outside the body. So very quickly before we move on to the photos and the videos, I just want to show you one quick benefit that I've seen by owning one of these lenses. And that is, if we look at this, right here it tells us it takes a 72 millimeter thread. So if you have an ND filter, which most of us does, you can go ahead and put on a 72 millimeter ND filter. One of the interesting things about that is that this right here is the Fujifilm's 50 to 140. So this is the 70 to 200 equivalent. This right here is also a 72 millimeter thread. So if you own both of these lenses, what you can effectively do is you can take this ND filter and put it on this. So you can effectively have you only need to effectively have one variable ND filters for both of these lenses, which is very cost effective. Plus, one thing that I found is that the 50 to 140, the lens caps on these are actually significantly better designed. It's a much, traditional lens cap. So if you put this onto your lens and then you put it on, it's just much better than one of these, because for this particular lens, really the ridges are what's holding it up, and it's just not a very stable platform. This is actually a much better design, and you can easily put this onto your 10 to 24. So at this point in the review, I want to show you some pictures and also some video that I actually took at Mammoth Cave. So this is the fun part of the review. Let's go ahead and go over the pictures first. The first picture right here was pretty close to the entrance of Mammoth Cave. Inside the cave, it was actually super dark, and the fact that I can bring back this much light to this image is pretty amazing. If I had the actual raw image, you pretty much couldn't see anything except for a few spots of lights. Had to bring it up like 3 stops of light and exposure to really bring out the colors and the details of the cave, but I was able to do it. As you can see up on the upper left hand corner right there, I was taking it at ½ second exposure at f4. Again, not a very fast lens at f4, but I was still able to bring back this much detail, and I was hand holding this thing too. So I was using my mini tripod, bracing it against my chest, and I was still able to take a really good picture just by being very stable. One of the best pictures that I took indoors, and without a tripod at an f4, that's pretty amazing. So that goes to show how much the image stabilization of the lens and also of the camera body really helps out when you have to shoot at really slow frame rates or shutter speeds. Next one, went ahead and went outside. I took this one at 24 millimeters, and to be honest with you, 10 millimeters, I find it very hard to take images because there's just so much information that it can gather that you kind of lose focus of what's going on. There wasn't really much of a place to actually took like huge landscapes, so 10 millimeters was kind of a waste out there. But as you can see, really nice colors right out of the camera, and I mean, everything is nice and crisp, and you can bring back the colors very easily with good saturation inside Lightroom. And I'm just really happy with the image. You can see the detail is really great. Just love it overall. Here is a picture of my friend Jake, and we were at the rocks right here. Again, I'm taking it at around 24 millimeters. This is probably where I find that I'm the most comfortable with this lens. Didn't really go too overboard in terms of the contrast and the details. It's just a nice soft image, something that would make, you know, a good picture profile or something that you can actually print. But as you can see, really nice colors right out of the camera. Didn't really have to do too much with it. If you don't want contrasty images, really right out of the cameras, the raw files are going to be super easy to work with. From here on, what I did is I started playing around a lot with the saturation and also just the intensity of the colors, because you know, when you actually look at what's out on the internet, it's really punchy, it's very contrasty. These are the type of image that will pop like on things like Instagram. So what I'm doing is I'm actually, you know, really bringing up these bright colors to make it good for things like Instagram. As you can see, this one's actually at 10 millimeters, and it takes a very gorgeous picture. Not too much distortion, and it's just a really pleasing picture to look at. Trust me, on that day it was not as blue outside and the colors weren't really this picturesque. So really you can do a lot of the raw files to bring out the colors of almost any image. Here is a picture inside the forest, and right here what I'm trying to show you is how much distortion there is in the lens, because I was actually shooting straight up like this and I was still able to get the road and most of the trees. You can see the distortion of the trees kind of bending in a little bit. Obviously further closer to the edge, the more warped it is at 10 millimeters. But again, colors look great. I was able to bring back a lot of the color, really, you know, brought down the highlights, you know, boosted all of the saturations, get a nice blue sky, but still, you know, the wood and the trees, really nice color. It's just something that I really find very easy to do with the Fuji lenses and the Fuji system itself, is that you can take a very bland picture and still make a very nice crisp image. Here is an image. It's probably one of my favorite images going out there. I was not that far away, but at 10 millimeters, or sorry, on this one, I was at 24 millimeters, and I was still able to get a lot of the trees around us, but I was also still able to get Jake nice and crisp inside the center. And what I was doing here was I don't know, I was just playing around. I wanted to see if I can actually separate him from the surrounding background, and I could do that by doing a lot of vignetting. If you look at this image, there's actually a huge vignette which darkened everything around Jake, and then it kind of highlights him, and then the road kind of guides you to him. So I really like this image. You can do some creative things with a very wide angle lens, and you just have to play around with it, have a little fun with it. But this is probably one of my favorite images coming out of that day. This last image right here, there's nothing special about this image, but I wanted to end on this one because a lot of people talk about, you know, what makes a Fuji system, you know, so special, and why everybody talks about the JPEGs. When I was actually just looking around trying to take the shot, and I was just looking through the electronic viewfinder, and this raw file actually looks very close to the JPEG. And the thing that I want to point out is the sky. The sky did not look this good. It was a very gray sky that day. But even looking at the JPEGs, when I looked through the EVF, it actually pulled out a lot of the blue colors, made this nice streaking blue clouds. Even on the JPEGs, it was just amazing. This is the first time I actually saw something. And this is like the first time I saw what people were talking about when they said, you know, the JPEGs on the Fuji cameras look amazing. It was how it actually processed the sky that it kind of did it for me. I actually had to do like a double take looking through the EVF and then looking at the skies like that's not what the sky looks like, but it exposed the sky just perfectly. It was a really awesome image. The context of the image is not really all that great, but I just want to, you know, quickly talk about, like, you know, when people say, you know, the Fuji cameras make great JPEGs and nobody really can pinpoint something, this is something that I pinpointed on that day that I saw. Was like, wow, this is pretty amazing. So obviously the lens is really good at taking photos. You would expect that from a high-end piece of glass from Fujifilms. Now I'm going to show you some of the video that I took during that time. And you know, this lens was created during a time when Fuji really didn't even think about video. So there's definitely some downsides to using this lens for video, and there's also some really good sides. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples. So the first example I want to show you is us leaving the visitor center. So we're going back out to the car. As you can see, the camera changing exposures wasn't really all that bad, but at 10 millimeters, when I'm walking with this, and I'm walking at, you know, a normal pace, and I'm not trying to hold it super steady and walk like a ninja or anything, because I do want to be discreet about this. I feel like the image is a little bit too unstable and it's kind of hard to watch. So that's not something that I would use. So at 10 millimeters, I just think that the image is unusable. I would rather do it around 18 millimeters. I think that's a usable rate. The next video I want to show you is the video shot that I took inside Mammoth Cave. So this is how dark it was. This is actually exposing pretty well to what it felt like being in there. So imagine taking a picture in there, handheld, and still getting a nice crisp image like I showed you in the first photo for this review. So again, it's actually doing a not bad job for, you know, taking video during this dark period. So I'm pretty impressed with it, and I'm pretty happy with how the video turned out during those dark moments. Now, one of the things that the lens excels at is actually taking slow motion. This is a point where I was just taking slow motion. Again, I'm holding the camera like this. I'm not holding it up to my eye, and I'm just trying to be very casual about it. And it takes some really beautiful slow motion. This is taken at 120 frames per second, and I'm reducing it down to 30 frames a second. So this is 4 times slow motion, and it just looks really good. The lens take naturally to it. This is with autofocus, and at f4, it really doesn't hurt the image, because you want most of the things in focus when you're taking slow motion, so that you can see what's going on. So really love the image coming out of the lens in slow motion. So this example right here is a pure test shot. I basically took the camera, put it in slow motion, and I just did a slow pan to see the type of detail that the lens can pick up for video, because there's a lot of small twigs, there's a lot of things to render into the video, and I feel like it's doing a really good job. You can you know, make up your own opinion on this, but I think that this is actually a very good test of the type of detail the sensor and the lens can bring out in a very, very, you know, busy type of shot. The last shot I want to show you is full 30 frames per second, me walking around with the lens zoomed in a little bit. And as you can see, when you zoom in a little bit, it's much easier to look at, and I think it's much more usable. So it's one of those things where once you zoom in above 18 millimeters, it's a very usable lens for video. And that is my quick review of this lens. Really love it. Definitely worth having in your collection. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. Hopefully this video really gave you a different perspective on how to use it as a vlogging lens. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.